need to circle back. So.
Yeah, I know.
Your schedule's much tighter than mine. We'll see if I get a comment back. I'll let you know.
Hi. Was that you I spoke with earlier? Oh, nice.
I would just say for the record that, but this is a regional, this is a review and recommendation on the regional budget, that you're not happy. But I would just say.
For tonight?
Start taking engagement, you will also.
Like everyone has their meetings, like, these two meetings,
Well, that's what she
meetings
said,
are at 6.
somebody put
That's
arguments
religious, unless there's some.
that having that trail there.
And then HCSC can come up around, Parks and Rec Commission's at 4:30.
All this is, whatever. You know something about it because it's for you that we're doing this anyway.
And there'll be two, because there's the Streetscape downtown presentation too.
Oh, nice.
That was after the bike.
No, you guys are fine.
Oh, right now, we're trying.
Okay, and there's also
He's fully good.
on a Friday between 10
And here.
Yeah,
Steven,
family friendly.
not Steven.
Family friendly.
Kevin is here,
depending how
I think Tom stayed,
So, 10 to 2.
instead,
Okay.
if there's any questions. But
March
they
22nd.
all, Tom and Eve both looked at it.
It'll be on the
And
Goodman building downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting.
You live on,
Really excited.
just say you live on that street. It's basically quite a where some of these infrastructure improvements are.
Hi. You have the PowerPoint, right? Did Diana send it to you?
Did you? Do you have the PowerPoint ready for NVTA?
I have,
A.
not what time you guys
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Diana printed that out. It's a map. I don't know. She said we owed you an updated map.
Okay.
So.
Just so you know, I think asked to there's like a 5-minute
Okay.
You might be interested actually, it's a streetscape improvement.
That's fine.
So, I'll give this to them now.
Okay.
It's really PowerPoint. It just turns off. Just hold this button down for like 5 seconds so it turns on.
Okay.
So, like, yeah, that.
Hello, Daniel.
How did I know you were coming?
Yeah, I gave you a preview. Yeah, take this fine. Did your husband tell you I was near your place?
Yeah, we're working on that. Over there,
If it's not on
or in their target there.
Yeah. Yeah, I but anyway, I went
Sharon Road.
hunting there. I don't know, I actually had about 2 minutes. And I ran the. And then I moved on. No, they were not there. We were hunting in.
Don't hammer Danielle.
Sean knows.
Yeah. Hey, it turns out you have to receive a notice for that. That's why I'm going to call the meeting.
Existing shares of road.
Yeah, they had
I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Planning Commission meeting
for March 5th. And Anthony, would you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you.
I'm waiting. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Gamera, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Monette,
Here.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Vice Chair Pont,
Here.
Chair Hardy,
Here.
and Commissioner Hale.
This is now time on our agenda for public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment or speak to the commission on items that are not on our agenda. Because any comments in the forum are not agendized, the commission cannot respond due to restrictions in the Brown Act. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the public forum? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent items on tonight's agenda. We have one, the Planning Commission minutes from February 19th, 2019. Consent items can be pulled from the consent agenda for discussion either by members of the public or by members of this commission. Is there anyone who would like to pull the minutes for discussion? Anyone in the public who'd like to pull this? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the minutes.
Second.
Ms. Gamero, the roll, please.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Vice Chair Pont,
Yes.
Commissioner Hale,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Hardy.
Yes. That brings us to the next part of our agenda, but we've received a request to take things a little bit out of order. And so rather than go straight to the public hearings, we'll go to the scheduled matters and item 6.1 or 6.2 is it that we're taking first? No, I've forgotten.
There was a request to hear item 6.2. I'm not sure if Gates and Associates are here to present yet.
Yeah, we do.
Well,
Public,
if not,
yes.
then I
Stick
will
to
go
the regular
back to
agenda.
item 5.1. Okay, thank you. After a brief detour, we have returned to the order of the agenda. Item 5.1 is consideration and recommendation of an
Chair Hardy.
ordinance. Yes.
There was also a request to move 6.1. And my apologies for that. That came in at the request of NVTA to support their staff in their travels back to Napa.
Okay, we'll just continue our figure eight here through the agenda. We're now back to scheduled matters and item 6.1, which is a Napa Valley Transportation Authority presentation of the Countywide bicycle plan.
And do we take this time to do? Yeah, I just want to disclose that I live on one of the streets that's proposed as a bike path.
As do I.
I think most of us do. It's not necessary to disclose because it's not our plan, so.
Probably not, but I mean, I don't think that there is.
Is there a staff presentation, or are we going directly to the consultant's presentation?
So this is being brought to Planning Commission because this is before it gets adopted. It's going to go to the environmental process, and like similar to our pedestrian plan that came to us after the fact, after MBTA adopted it. We're bringing it to Plan Commission before it gets to that extent, so you have time to comment on it, provide the public time to comment on it, and just provide help with the outreach with MBTA, Napa Valley Transportation Authority, and getting feedback from the city before it goes to council later for adoption. And we have Danielle Schmitz here from MVTA to present tonight. Diana Meehan was out of town and out of state at a conference.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So again, I'm Danielle Schmitz. I'm with the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, John Pont's old stomping ground. He worked for NVTA, known as NCTPA, for many years. So if you have any questions, just ask John about my presentation. The countywide bicycle plan we update about every 4 or 5 years. Our last update was in 2012, and as Erica mentioned, when it's coupled with our countywide pedestrian plan, it creates a complete active transportation plan. We do have several elements to our countywide transportation plan. It's not just one countywide transportation plan. There's actually 6 individual jurisdiction plans. NVTA is a intergovernmental body. It's a joint powers agency, so we represent all of the jurisdictions of Napa, and so we actually have a plan, a bicycle plan for each of the jurisdictions, St. Helena being one of them. This is just a project schedule to kind of tell you where we've been and where we're headed. So we're coming to the completion, hopefully, of the plan by summer of this year. We kicked off this plan actually in summer of 2017. We did a big initial outreach and community outreach efforts. We had a live mapping tool where the community could go on and kind of explain where they bike or where they would like to bike, but they don't quite feel comfortable biking there yet. We also went through an existing conditions analysis where we worked with staff from each jurisdiction. The consultants worked with staff from each jurisdiction, as well as Diana Meehan, who's the project manager for the bike plan, and identified kind of where you actually have current bike plans in various different classes, from class 1 all the way to class 4, as well as what kind of condition they're in. So there was a lot of field work and reconnaissance in that stage of the plan. And then we did a draft proposed bicycle network that we also circulated. So there was many times that we did do touch points throughout this process where we contacted staff or the bicycle advisory committee from St. Helena and asked for input on various components of the plan. And now we're kind of at the draft final stage where we have the draft plan that is circulating for public comment. So it is still draft, and so if there are changes that you see when reviewing the St. Helena plan in particular, please comment to Diana, because we'd be happy to incorporate your changes as far as like the bicycle network. I think John mentioned that there was maybe some existing network that wasn't identified on the existing network map. Please let us know where that is and we can incorporate it. So this is kind of work completed to date. As mentioned, we did a lot of data gathering. This is actually a more sophisticated plan than 2012 because we have a GIS network layer, which is going to be very helpful when we go forward in doing like things like the countywide transportation plan, which is the long range transportation plan for the whole county that includes all modes: transit, bike, walking, and as well as highway. We have a design toolkit, kind of best practices and standards for bicycle facility development, as well as recommendations, again, for each of the jurisdictions in the county. We did extensive public stakeholder outreach. Kind of the big events that we tabled at were Porch Fest. We were really trying to reach a community of casual bike riders at Porch Fest. A lot of times when you are doing a mode-specific plan, like bike plan, you get kind of the same usual suspects that come to all the events and are the first to tell you kind of what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right or provide feedback. But we really wanted to reach the community at large. And so at Porch Fest, you kind of get a lot of the casual bike riders, people that maybe are not commuters. They're not the recreational riders that you see in full gear, killing it up Veeder, but it's just the people that come on weekends and they want to bike downtown and listen to some music and maybe get something to eat, and they don't know that there's a bike plan. So we were trying to reach those kind of casual riders, what we call the interested but concerned rider category, to really try to create a bike network for the county that will encourage them to use the bike as an alternative mode more often. So in the plan contents, we have the goals and policies, again, the existing conditions network, implementation strategies and programs, and then the individual jurisdiction plans as well. This is the vision of the plan. It came from, I think it was refined from the 2012 plan. Again, this is an update, so there was a lot of the vision and goals from the 2012 plan came back through our different committees for refinement. But one of the big pieces is really the aggressive policy or the aggressive goal of a 10% mode split. This would be increasing the bicycle mode to 10% by 2035. This actually came from the regional transportation plan, so it was an adopted policy of theirs that then got adopted into our countywide transportation plan as well. Again, the data provided in this plan is a little bit more sophisticated, I would say, than the other types of plan, or the other plan iterations that we've done in the past. And this is because one of the biggest changes in this bicycle plan and design is because we have a better understanding about the types of streets and bicycle facilities that people want to use. So we're really focused on this plan in that 51 to 56%, which is the interested but concerned bike rider. The highly confident bike riders are the ones I mentioned are kind of like the recreational riders that go, they don't mind zigging and zagging out of traffic. They're very confident. The somewhat confident, I would say, is maybe your everyday bicycle commuter. And then the interested and concerned is people like the casual bike rider, that they ride their bike every now and often, but you know, there's some streets that are, the traffic's just, the volumes of traffic is too much, or the speed of travel is too fast, so they don't feel comfortable riding their bike to places that maybe they would feel comfortable if the facilities were more approachable to them. The bicycle network, the existing facilities, as mentioned, we looked at origins and destinations throughout the county of where people would like to bicycle ride, or where they do bicycle ride, or they are planned to bicycle ride, but maybe there's some barriers in the way. And tool design really looked at ways to better connect the bicycle networks in all the jurisdictions and throughout the county by taking this approach of the interested but concerned bicycle rider. Again, this is a graph that kind of just details anything over in the dark blue on the far right or upper part of the graph is kind of when people feel like they need a separated bike lane, either a vertical separation, which we call class 4 bike lane, or actually separated from the roadway like the Vine Trail shared use path bike lane. And then the other gradients are kind of the other two milestones of, oh, people will feel okay to be on a bike lane that has a stripe, or maybe a green bike lane if it's under 35 miles an hour. And they feel comfortable sharing the road on what we call class 3 bike lane or bicycle boulevard if it's under 5 miles an hour or so. And it also really depends on the volume of vehicles or traffic, average daily traffic on those road facilities as well. So this is the proposed bicycle network. We have 450 miles of new bicycle network in the plan. And these are the various different types of classifications on the left of the facility type. Again, something like the Vine Trail would be a class 1 facility, which is a separated path, and all the way down to a class 3, which is kind of a rural bike route, which just might be designated on a map or designated by a sign or by paint on the road that's a shared the road facility. And then a class 4 is kind of a new bike lane classification that came out in the last few years, and it's a vertical separated bike lane, but it's still on the road usually. So again, the recommended facilities are identified in your plan. and we still are looking for public comment on them. So again, if you guys have comments, I think Diana shared a matrix with either Noah or Erica about how to get comments back to NVTA on the plan. And we're taking comments on facilities specifically through mid-month, and then we will be starting the environmental process. The plan also looks at cost estimates by facility type. This is just a really good tool for the jurisdictions to use. It doesn't include right-of-way acquisition or roadway widening, but it really gives a good estimate. Okay, you want to put a class 2 for 3 miles along this facility. You're looking at a cost estimate roughly of X amount. We also have policy and program recommendations such as Vision Zero policy, wayfinding program, Safe Routes to School funding, and Safe Routes to School program identified all in kind of the recommended program highlights. And I think that about wraps it up. So next steps, again, we're doing kind of a round dog and pony show across the county, presenting the draft plan to different groups, like this group, the Planning Commission here in St. Helena, and we are really looking for substantive comments on the network by the mid-month because we have to kick off the environmental portion of the plan. If you have other comments on, formatting or language, or you see some typos, that definitely can be. We'll take that comment past the March 15th deadline, but really the March 15th deadline, what we're looking for is network changes, because we will be taking the plan through environmental process where our environmental consultant has to look and say, okay, well, you're going to do ground disturbance here to put in a class 1, and so these are kind of the environmental issues that would have to be addressed. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Diana Meehan, again, is the project manager for the bike plan, and this is her contact information. You can email her any questions directly. And again, also, I think we sent a matrix to St. Helena staff to kind of consolidate any comments. I know some of your city council members had some comments on the plan at our board meeting in February that we presented the plan at, and so we will. We're hoping that the city can consolidate those and then just send them over.
And I'd just like to jump in and thank you, Ms. Schmitz, for coming up and presenting. We're a little bit out of sync with our general plan update and this update process, but it is ideal that should the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council support the plan, that this would become our bicycle plan in the general plan, and then that way we could leverage that as development comes forward to encourage sections of the project to be built by private development projects, in addition to the grant funding and other public improvements that would be made. So while this plan may not be currently reflected in the general plan draft that's going to be brought forward to the Planning Commission and City Council for adoption shortly, it would be staff's goal to incorporate this through a general plan amendment once it's finally adopted. And so that's why it is absolutely critical for the Planning Commission to review and comment on it, and the City Council as well as our community members, because ultimately you want to be in sync with your regional transportation plans. It makes leveraging grant funding, implementing grant funds, encouraging the construction of these facilities as private development comes forward. It makes all that possible by basically having everything in sync. So that's why I asked NVTA to present to the Planning Commission, both to allow direct input from you and then also to elevate the prominence of this process for the community here in St. Helena.
So, if I understand that correctly, Director Hausch, this will not be part of our general plan discussion. So if we want to have the benefit of some interactive discussion and comments before the general plan's adopted, this would be our best opportunity right now?
That's exactly right.
Very good. So,
And can I ask something? No. To clarify?
Not
No, okay.
just yet. So I think this is the time for the commission to ask questions, and then we can offer comments if we have any. Bobby, would you like to start?
Well, I just wanted to clarify further. It sounded to me like this won't be in, yeah, that they'll, after the general plan and the general plan EIR are certified and accepted, that then there will be an amendment made. This would enter those documents via the process of an amendment.
That is the ideal process, yes. If it's very common for regional transportation planning to be done not on the same schedule of local jurisdictions' general plan updates, and so it is common for a local jurisdiction, after commenting and participating in a regional plan, to then implement those into the general plan document.
Any comments on the plan itself from the commission? John?
I had, can we ask questions of the representative here at this time? Or is it
Yes,
for
we
later?
can continue with questions, certainly.
Okay, I was just wondering if any of the work that you've done included making space for adult tricycles, for wheelchairs and for walkers, and for separating, so that it would feel safe for a senior to be on a tricycle, on the bike, there'd be enough room for a two-wheel bicycle and tricycles, and whoever might be walking as well would not feel, I don't know if that was included in any of the work you did.
So a tricycle would probably just be treated the same as a bicycle. Is that? Yeah.
I was saying, is there enough space for that so that there'd also be space for people walking if there are
Yeah,
walkers
so
there?
normally for a bicycle, a shared use, are you talking about a shared use path?
Right, because
Yeah.
two-wheel bicycles go way faster than a
Yeah.
tricycle.
Well, so with the shared use path, a lot of the time, the bicyclists that go really fast, and they prefer actually to ride on the road.
Okay.
I see it at Solano, like at the Vine Trail between Yountville and Napa. You'll see like the full gear cyclists riding on Solano, and more of like the family oriented cyclists riding on the shared use path. You kind of bring up a good question that we're grappling with right now in the planning community, with just as where does it fit when we're looking at things like scooters. And this is more of in kind of like the urban areas like San Francisco and Oakland. They're having to deal with like a scooter, electric scooter, electric bicycles, pedestrians, unicycles, and then how do they all fit? Like, where do they fit on the road? Because if you're on a tricycle, I would say it's a bike lane versus the sidewalk is really meant for pedestrians and bicyclists, or a three-wheel bicycle shouldn't be, or tricycle shouldn't be on the sidewalk. But then sometimes there's not room because you don't have a bike lane next to a sidewalk. So
you also trying to figure out how to fit skateboards in there too?
well, skateboard.
I mean, if you're doing scooters and
Right now, we're really just focused on pedestrians and bicyclists. So I'd say skateboarders are most likely they're going to use the sidewalk or a bike lane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't know if these are questions or comments. How do you want to word that?
Well, I want to start with questions. See if we can take care of the questions first and then move on to the comments.
All right. First question then.
When we finish the questions, she can sit down.
Your accident data only goes to 2013.
Oh yes, I think that's the most recent data. It takes a while for them to compile it and then provide it.
It's available from the state faster than that, but you have selected to use a third-party provider.
Yes.
If you got the data directly from the state, you could have data from up to the end of last year.
I think there's some specific reason, and I can get Diana to comment back on you, but there is a specific reason why they're using that data. I don't know if it's because of the way that they classify the collision type, but I know that there is a reason, so I can get that back to the
Because that seems
commission.
a rather elderly data set,
Yeah.
frankly. That is a question.
Careful, some of us might consider themselves elderly.
You say that like it's a bad thing, yeah.
I think that was my only question. The rest of them were sort of
Comments.
more probing than that, yes.
If there are no other questions, let's move on to comments. Who would like to comment on the proposal? John, I know you're ready.
Yeah.
Go.
I didn't spend a great deal of time reading this, but first and foremost, Aaron's title is missing on the page, on the acknowledgements page. That's the most important thing. The next thing, when you do report accidents here, I didn't see any qualifiers in there at all. We get a huge volume of tourists. Just accidents per 100,000 population is probably not the best way to even consider reporting it here because of our high volume of visitors. And there was a couple of locations where that did come up in the report. I would think just a qualifier in there that says, yes, but we get 4 million visitors a year, so this may be an unnaturally high number when you report it in terms of per 100,000 population. I'm not sanguine about reaching a 10% mode split. That's an awfully high number.
It is very ambitious. So that came down directly from the regional transportation plan that
But what
MTC
they're
adopted.
ignoring is the walk to work rate we have here.
It's pretty high.
So they're blowing that off. I think we'd have a strong argument for using a lower number. I mean, our walk to work rate, you report here in St. Helena is like 7%. In Calistoga, it was like 14%. Those are insanely high walk to work rates. If we've got those, I think we'd have a good case for arguing at a regional level that 10%'s a non-starter here for bicycles. Too high. Too high. I mean, when you think about it, we've got roughly a third of our population are seniors, and that number's going up. It's generally not the class of people you see on bicycles, for the most part. But walking, another kettle of fish. The network mileage in St. Helena, you showed it was only 0.2 of a mile of Class 3.
Mm-hmm.
If you look in your old records, you will see that there was a TDA 3 approval for St. Helena about 20 years ago that signed maybe 2.5, 3 miles, and the signs are still up.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
So on page 97, there's existing facilities, and so it looks like Pope Street is marked as the Class 3 bike route. And if the commissioner staff sees something that should be on here that isn't.
I'm looking at page 106, which is what St. Helena would adopt, correct? Because it's St. Helena's plan.
Well, these are the recommended facilities, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, your other table, but look, under existing length for Class 3s, you show 0.2 of a mile.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is if on the existing conditions or existing facilities, if there's Class 3s that are signed by the city of Calistoga, or I mean St. Helena that we've missed, just let us know and we can put it in the plan.
I'm thinking such a glaring error is the responsibility of your consultant to fix. That's not even close, not even anywhere reasonably close. So I don't think.
So do you have an idea of where these Class 3 facilities are?
Spring Street, Madrona, Sylvaner, upper half, Riesling,
And they're signed?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Stockton, I think. I know it's not Hudson and it's not Allen. I think it is Stockton. What?
So maybe Erica or Aaron could send us a list of the facilities if you think that there's class 3. I'll reference also the 2012 bike plan if you're saying it was TDA 3 funds from that long ago, but
Well, you still should have a copy of the resolution. Those shouldn't be tossed out.
Doesn't mean they're not.
Well, it doesn't mean they're not, but they shouldn't be. Page 97, you show Madrona, the walking path off Madrona, as a Class 1. It's not signed as a Class 1, it's not striped as a Class 1. It's 3 feet wide and was originally installed as a deal with the nearby landowners not to widen Madrona. So it is a sidewalk. It is not a shared Class 1, was never intended to be a shared Class 1.
And that may be I think we thought it should be a Class 1 in the future, not an existing.
It shows as existing.
I know, I'm just saying,
Okay.
we talked to NVTA about whether that be a proposed one,
okay.
not an existing one, so
Well, it
that could
does
be
show as existing.
miscommunications.
So, yeah, that'd be a perfect example of something to get back to us so that we can say this is a proposed Class 1 and not an existing Class 1.
Okay, well, that changes your mileage even more. Just a general comment on how you break down your facilities. You show bike boulevards as a separate type of facility, but not on the table. On the tables of mileage.
Oh, you mean they was just consolidated under Class 3 on the table?
Yes.
Yeah, that was specific request from the city of Napa for the plan as a whole to have a rural Class 3 versus a Class 3 bike boulevard.
The problem is you show it differently on the maps than you do on the tables.
No, the tables, the Class 3 is all aggregated into one line item, Class 3. And then on the maps, it was specifically, the Class 3s are specifically shown as boulevard, bike boulevard, and rural Class 3.
That's correct. And what
Yes.
I'm saying, if you should show it you should show it in both resources the same way. Okay? Otherwise, you can't really tell what your mileage of one is versus the other.
Well, they're all Class 3, so that's, for the table, it's fine, but for the maps, it's more of a, for the user. So, Class 3, rural, Class 3 is quite different than a low volume, low speed bicycle boulevard in the city of Napa or the city of St. Helena. And so the reason that it's specified on a map visually is so that a reader would be like, okay, well, this is a Class 3, a rural Class 3, and so I know that the volume or the speed of vehicles might be a lot higher versus a boulevard, Class Boulevard, shared the road, Class 3 in a city where the speeds are like 25 miles an hour. So it's more of a visual, but they're all categorized as Class 3.
And I realize they're all Class 3s,
Yeah.
but there are different striping rules for Class 3 bike boulevards than there are for plain Class 3s.
Mm-hmm.
So they are different physically on the road. On top of that, you're in a town in which 96, 97% of the street mileage is at 25 miles an hour or less.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and so we have that designated Class 3 bike boulevard if it was in the town and the speed limit is under 25.
I'm just saying if you differentiate them in one place, you should differentiate them in another. Okay. Oh, you don't show any real routing for the Vine Trail through St. Helena other than sort of a mark down the center of the map.
Yeah, that's because there's not a designated route through St. Helena.
Do you have any interface with them?
Yeah.
because their last couple of suggestions were sort of non-starters off the get-go. If you could perhaps add a little reality into the discussions of routing through St. Helena, they wouldn't come up with the idea of closing Oak Street and make it one direction only, and actually present that as a viable option.
The city is working with, per the direction by council several months ago, the city is working with the Vine Trail on a shared agreement, cost share agreement to look at the school-to-school pathway as well as other feasible alternate routes through town per council direction.
But their idea of closing down Oak Street to one direction was never going to work. And that was an honest proposal from them. That's about it. Oh. Elliot wrote the last one, and the one before that. I just did all the others.
Yeah, Diana actually helped Elliot in 2012 on that one because he was wrapping up his career at that time.
Commissioner Hale, do you have any comments?
No, I don't.
I can say more.
Commissioner Manette?
Yeah, I just want to, I think it's impressive, and I want to thank you for all the work you've done.
Oh,
And
no problem.
it's really, it's really happening. I remember when it was first proposed, so thank you.
I have just a few, and these are as much for our Public Works Director as for you. It looks to me, and I'm looking at the proposed bicycle network graphic on page 107.
Okay.
It looks to me as though the pathway behind the office development on Adams that connects the sidewalk on Adams with the sidewalk on Hunt is shown as a shared use path or proposed shared use path. This is a connection between Adams and Hunt, between Highway 29 and the trail. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
That in its present condition is so severely neglected. I found it dangerous to walk in wet conditions. There were so many slippery leaves accumulated on it. I really wasn't sure I could manage without falling. And I think there's even a photo here that may be of the same pathway and dry connections. That's on page 98. I'm not sure if figure SH.6 is the same spot, but I think it could be. And here, whether it is or not, one can see this is typical of sidewalks and other pedestrian facilities in St. Helena. It's halfway overgrown with the foliage and branches on either side. So I just want to call out, not that this is any surprise to you, Ms. Smitty's, but conditions at present are poor. I find them especially troubling at night when I can't necessarily see the branch that's about to poke me in the eye, and yet I'm walking on a sidewalk, so I couldn't omit mentioning that concern. Coming back to the same map or graphic on page 107, I also see connections down Hunt to Railroad Avenue and down Adams to Railroad Avenue. I'm walking to and from my office every day, most often going through the intersection at Adams and Railroad, but occasionally going down to Hunt. The intersections there during peak hours are truly challenging for the pedestrian because the drivers at the stop signs are really only looking at the other cars, period. If I were bicycling, I'd be hoping for a routing that didn't direct me to our worst intersections. So that's my only other comment.
Can I add one thing that was
of course.
inspired by you? You know, in terms of walking and being able to walk with the foliage, you might keep in mind that I mean they're difficult for a person just walking, but if you have an umbrella, you end up in the street. I mean, just walking over here today when I came to this meeting. So, you know, I don't know if that it fits in with the kinds of things you were saying, but to think of people with umbrellas as well as just walking, it would be would really make it a walking friendly town, because if you you know, you have to walk in the rain sometimes, and I like to walk in the rain, but it's you really always end up in the street, which is you get splashed and all kinds of things. So anyway, it's a little more than just the width of a person.
So thank you very much for the presentation. I
Yeah, no
hope this
problem.
all leads to a much more pedestrian and bicycle-friendly network in St. Helena and throughout the county.
Yep, and we'll work with your staff on comments.
Oh, well, excuse me. Ms. Smithies has reminded me that I should ask for public comments. There's no reason we can't entertain comments from anyone who wishes to speak. So please, come to the microphone, introduce yourself, and let us hear what you have to say.
All right. My name is Denise Henket, and I just joined the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee. And I'm very happy with the plan that you just presented. Thank you so much. I come from a country, the Netherlands, where it's all about biking. There's more bikes than people. And living here, moving here actually, I was so excited because it's relatively flat here, the weather is gorgeous, and hardly anybody is on the bike, which to me felt very unusual, because why not? It's healthy, it's great for families. Children by 7 years old, they're old enough to go by themselves to school, right? I found it so dangerous, and together with me, and there's still a lot of young people living here in St. Helena, we all find it dangerous. You cannot send your child to go to school by themselves, and it's not safe to have a play date after school to go from east to west or west to east, and that makes me actually very sad. So I'm glad that there is a plan coming, although there are things on there that still don't feel safe, like Pope Street, the line on the road, and the road, if you're on your bike, if you tried it, you're almost falling in there. You cannot be on the road. You still have to be on the pedestrian path, because that's the only way that is safe. Pope Street in general, that was my problem with what I saw in the plan. The bridges, there's no view. There is a hill, of course, coming onto Main Street, and a railroad. How do you even get there? So maybe there has to be some other way how to navigate that. I think it's great what the Vine Trail tries to do, and discarded a little bit going over Railroad Avenue. But I was wondering, and I don't know if it's a time to talk about that now or just a question that we should ask Diana, but how about roundabouts? What would slow traffic down? Would be safe? You have a whole overview. I didn't see anything of that in the plan, and I think it would be a good addition. Also, what I just read about the Safe Routes to School funding, I would love to know. I would love to hear more about that, because I think that would be great. And I think what Mr. Ponte just mentioned, that 7 to 14% walk to work seems high, or bike 10 seems high. To me, that seems so low. I think that we all can do it. Why wouldn't we do that? I don't see why. If we all can make it safe, and at least safer than it is now, it seems very, very low to me, to be honest. That's it for now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Christopher Cole, 140 Rose Lane, St. Helena. Before I get started, I had a question about the mode split numbers. I see your target is 10% in 2035. Was I correct in reading in the current report, plan that we're at 0.3%?
Yeah, it's less than 1%.
It's less than 1%. Yeah, and I think we can speak to the issue here, which is a large part of that is safety. And as I was preparing my comments tonight, I looked back in my files because I've been sending comments. I started back with Greg Desmond about 15 years ago regarding bicycle issues in St. Helena. And I revisited my comments from 2010 in which I recommended that we should have 10% by 2015. So we're at 0.3% in 2019. Clearly, the 2012 plan has failed. Why has it failed? I think a big part of that is safety. So I'm resubmitting my 2010 plans with no edits, believe it or not. And I'm augmenting them with a rather unusual request that focuses on the proposed 2019 plan. And what I'm going to do is read my letter so that you get an understanding of it. And some may see this as a bit negative, but because I'm saying that very little has been accomplished in St. Helena, even though we do have a bike lane on Pope Street. If you went to another community, you would see that our version of a bike lane is highly compromised. I mean, it was a miracle for Steve Palmer to get that approved, but it's a marginal situation. And then, of course, we have the infamous Green Lane, which was a huge accomplishment by the original ATC, which I was a member of. Very difficult to get that done, but it failed. And the reason that it failed, and I think it should actually be removed from the plan, is because it doesn't make the connection. It stops about 100 feet short of Birch Street, and the original plan was to run that from the elementary school to a calm street in the neighborhood on the north side of Silver Creek so that young children could ride their bike to school. Okay, you're just about to Birch Street and you're dumped back out in traffic if there are cars parked in those 3 spaces. And Steve was running that, and I kind of took the back seat because we were working on other things. Well, when it was ultimately painted, I said, Steve, what's going on here? It doesn't go to the connector street. And the reason that he stopped it was because of a zoning change. So I have addressed this with a number of people. We're going to take it to the current committee. And that's one thing that really needs to be done now. Maybe we can make that bike lane work, but that connection needs to be made. Okay, my comments for today. My current review of the draft Napa County bicycle plan is preceded by my past comments over the last 10 years on related projects, including the 2012 update. In short, there have been no significant changes in St. Helena, and my comments remain the same. I am resubmitting my comments dated November 19th, 2010. To clarify my position on this plan, I am also submitting photos of existing bicycle lanes in or near the St. Helena city limits. If I might have an extension.
Please, finish.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going outside the city limits. This is important because the city of St. Helena is the first responder for these areas, which include 2 fatalities since 2006, neither of which are shown on the plan's bicycle collisions map. In addition, I submit ancillary comments related to the Caltrans misrepresentation of the Highway 29 channelization project. I do note that Highway 29 is not represented as a bicycle route on the proposed countywide plan, which is correct. However, Highway 29 is a de facto route used by residents and event cyclists and was designated by Caltrans was designed by Caltrans in violation of State Code Section 21720, which is the 3 Foot for Safety Act. This was a complicated matter. If you have questions about it, ask me, or you can speak with Kelly Hirschberger at Caltrans, because we got into it deeply before the road was striped. There is enough asphalt on Highway 29. But the root of my comment has to do with the Silverado Trail. The Silverado Trail is the root of my continued objection to the plan. This is not a Class 2 route. In 2014 and 2015, when I was on the first version of the ATC, the Silverado Trail was not included in the city's plan review because it is out of our jurisdiction. However, all subsequent efforts with Rick Marshall, who was the past County Roads Commissioner, Paul Wilkinson, County Transportation Engineer, and the Napa County Bicycle Coalition have failed to fix the problem. I recommend that the city reject the plan until that portion of the Silverado Trail north of Zinfandel Lane is reclassified as Class 3. This is the only way that we can force Napa County to restripe the road to its pre-2008 condition, when there was a minimum 3-foot bike lane from Napa to Calistoga. To summarize my recommendation is as follows. Use the civic power of the City of St. Helena to improve the safety on the Silverado Trail within its sphere of influence and first response. Reject the proposed bicycle plan until either the Silverado Trail is downgraded to Class 3 or Napa County Department of Public Works agrees to restripe the road. This is not a $1 million fix. As I said in 2010, the plan should focus on projects that are achievable quickly with existing infrastructure at minimum expense. If the county incorporated striping standards that protected cyclists in their improved contracts, we would not have this problem. The required asphalt is there. Please feel free to contact me about any of these matters. And then connected to my comments, I have resubmitting my 2010 comments. Reduce automobile collision. In 2010, we were going to wait 25 years to be 50% safer. Nobody's going to wait for that. We should review all road projects, not just new construction. This is particularly true of paving projects which shortchange the cyclist or result in inappropriate striping. We prioritized the Oak Street extension for Class 1. That never happened, and it was a huge missed opportunity for the city because they had an MOU that provided a connection from Vidovich to Grayson. I think that's since been lost. Unfortunate. There was funding and there was interest. I have about 20 pages of exhibits and photos demonstrating the various issues, and I'm going to submit those tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
You're welcome. Can I do that? I can give you everything electronically. Yep. I have your contact info.
Hello, my name is Pam Smithers. I live on Vallejo Street in St. Helena. And rather than repeat the safety concerns that you are hearing tonight, well, I think I will repeat the safety concerns that you're hearing here tonight. I think there is a tremendous hunger for bicycling in our town, but people will not get on their bikes as long as there are so many cars, so much cut-through traffic and speeding on our streets. They're just not going to do it. Where I live is near that green bike lane, so I live near the primary school. That educates 4 to 7-year-olds. So you can get a 7-year-old on a bike, and I see moms and dads with their kids on the, with the intention at the beginning of the school year to do this. But soon they see, I invite you all to go out there actually any morning about 8:15 and look at how many cars are there. Nobody's going to take their kids on that bike lane with all of those cars. It's really, you've all got to go out there and see that if you've never seen it for yourself. Anyway, so that's kind of that. In terms of elderly people, I don't know what elderly is, but I'm 64 and I just came back from Tahoe. I got senior rates for skiing, and I too would like to ride my bike around town. It's a little disconcerting, even for someone like me who, rides on Silverado Trail. You've got to do something really for the safety and get these bike lanes and the signage going so that we can have, this is the perfect town. It's a perfect town for bicycling. Anyway, I have one tangible comment for the plan. On page 109, under law enforcement activities, it says provide focused law enforcement operations at high collision locations. I think that should say at high collision locations, at school zones and along routes to schools. If we can't get kids on their bikes, they'll never, that's when they learn to ride a bike, when they're 7, 8, and 9 years old, and then we're going to end up with a bunch of people that aren't active at all, and it's going to be a mess. We really need to encourage this plan and everything in it and our law enforcement to create safer streets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Anthony McKelly, 1125 Cornella. I'm going to first address a couple comments Mr. Ponte and Lester Hardy made. I built Spotswood Winery in the beginning. Madrona was never going to be widened. Building that sidewalk on the south side was a condition of the use permit, which Mary Novak paid for herself. It was nothing to do with widening Madrona Avenue. That was just a way for pedestrians to walk from Hudson to Sylvaner, because there was no sidewalk on the north side. So the city imposed her to do that, which she did do. The thing about Lester walking on Hunt Avenue, we have ordinances in the city where homeowners are supposed to trim those trees, fix the sidewalk, and create and fix all those obstacles that people don't walk on the sidewalk, so they walk in the street. But we don't enforce
I'm well aware of that.
Okay, but we don't even enforce our own ordinances that are on the books. If we would just do that, people would probably walk more, but they don't want to trip all the time or hit bushes that hit them in the face all the time. We don't enforce anything in St. Helena anymore. I was at the City Council meeting back in January, February, when the Vine Trail tried to go up Oak Avenue, make Oak Avenue a one-way street after Adams. The City Council completely unanimously shot that plan down. And they told the Vine Trail to go back to the west side of town. I personally would like to know where the west side of town is that they're going to do. They said go back to the original plan. But nobody's ever said where is that original plan. Like on Pope, they did the little piece of bike trail in front of Silverado Orchards, but it doesn't go anywhere. It goes a couple blocks and it stops. It doesn't connect to nothing. So it'd be nice to know how they're going to get through St. Helena, because I am part owner in a building on Oak that they were going to eliminate our parking, and we weren't happy about that. And how are you going to eliminate all the parking? And then they want to make it one-way street up to Madrona and maybe do Kearney the one-way back. I mean, the Vine Trail was trying to dictate to us how we should run our town, and that's not right. We should tell the Vine Trail or whoever else, this is our town and this is how we're going to do it. One thing that people are probably not going to like is that growing up here, because I was born here, I had to pay a license every year for my bicycle. But that went away, so I'm wondering why we're spending all these funds for bicyclists that don't contribute one dime. We're all in this together, and I really feel they should pay their fair share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKelly. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on this plan? Anything else from the commission? I don't believe there's any action for us to take.
My only worry, and it's a big one, is as it currently stands, there's too much missing. There's too much missing to consider this plan complete or adoptable for the city of St. Helena.
Well, I wanted to really thank the public. I'm really impressed with the amount of history and knowledge and articulation, or articulateness in our community. And thank you for bringing up the issues that you brought up.
The big picture message I get from thinking about all the comments that we've heard tonight is that it's going to be very difficult, perhaps even impossible, to create a genuinely safe network for bicyclists without thinking of it in direct relation to what we do with our circulation element. Now, one of the things that Ms. Smithers pointed out, without putting it in just so many words, is that when we direct bicycles by creating pathways on on the essential connecting streets that provide relief to the congestion on Highway 29 and are also important routes to destinations within town, the conflict between the automobile traffic volume and use by children, for example, is just honestly impossible to overcome, I think, with a path that's on the city street. What looks in the abstract like a logical route on a map because it's a through path and so on isn't necessarily a route that's going to encourage or motivate people to bicycle, because we have traffic issues and related safety issues on a lot of streets in a lot of different places just because of the fact that there's an insane through traffic volume, given the fact that Highway 29 runs through the middle of town, and a significant amount of local traffic. And I'm not seeing much here. The Vine Trail may ultimately be one way to provide a route, at least a north-south route, for bicyclists off the street. But finding ways that really work on our streets, I think, is a challenge and has to be considered together with the circulation element in the general plan. I mean, I know it would be in the same part of the general plan, but I really mean talking about and thinking about the two things together. Just because I don't see any other way to address the safety concerns that arise out of the conflict between the bicycles, pedestrians, and motor vehicles. I think the same thing is absolutely true if we're really trying to make it easier for pedestrians. And I appreciate Mr. McKelly's comments about our failure to enforce the rules we already have. I tend to understate my position, and Mr. McKelly is much more forthright than I am often, but that's really my point each and every time I bring up the encroachment of vegetation onto the sidewalks. We do have rules in place, and I understand all of the challenges that come with trying to enforce those regulations when they've been neglected for so long, because the encroachments are everywhere now. It's hard to find a block where you don't have an issue of that kind. But to ignore those concerns means that the condition just gets progressively worse. And I seem to be someone who walks more than a lot of other people, so maybe it bothers me more than some, but I can tell you it bothers me a lot. And that's my bit. Is there anything else before we move on? Thank you all. In my figure 8 through the agenda, I'm getting a little bit dizzy now. Are we back to 5.1. No, that would be too easy. We're at 6.2. Okay.
Yes, you are. So the City of St. Helena is embarking on a great new downtown streetscape plan and project with the $1.2 million grant we received 2 years ago. We're just beginning the design phase with BKF Consulting Engineers and Gates and Associates Landscape Architects on bringing you new sidewalks. And then as a bigger scheme of things in downtown with the Cosmont marketing report that was done by the city manager earlier or late last year. In combination with this project, we're trying to incorporate some of those elements on top of getting the new sidewalk grant implemented in 2 years. And by October 2020, we're going to have to submit to Caltrans to get authorization for construction by February of 2021. So we can actually start construction on just the sidewalk and some streetscape portions of plants. There'll probably be a phasing of this project. But I have Linda Gates here from Gates and Associates and her husband David Gates in the audience here to provide a brief orientation of the public outreach that will be coming in the days and weeks and months ahead.
Right. And to repeat everything that she just told you. You always do that to me. So first, next slide. So I'm with Gates and Associates. We're the landscape architects working on this project, and it's also handling the outreach. BCAF is the civil engineers working with Caltrans, making sure that actually we can do everything we want to do. They're amazing. We have the fun job, so just so you know. And then M Group will be working with us to address the secret kind of issues. So we got you covered. Okay, next slide.
Are you saying that working with Caltrans is not the fun job? Did I miss something? Never mind.
I'm just being honest. So the city was fortunate enough to receive a grant to do streetscape improvements on Main Street. But we can't start looking at Main Street until we understand the bigger context. People have likened it to, you have to look at the kitchen before you can design the stove. So part of this project is actually occurring in sort of two pieces. And one is we're looking at the greater, how people use the downtown now, or how they want to use the downtown, how they circulate, and sort of come up with a kind of comprehensive vision, and then do the Main Street improvements. We've already started doing some of the opportunities and constraints, sort of walking around the analysis, and we want to create a pedestrian environment that goes basically from the bridge to City Hall, but recognizing that it's probably sort of in different blocks that will have to do different kinds of solutions. Sort of you have the entry sort of throat, and you have the downtown core, and you have sort of the civic block. So in future, you'll be hearing more about it, but we're just starting at that level. I'm doing a very quick, brief overview because that's what I was asked to do. Next slide. And then we'll spend our money for the first phase here. So it's kind of really cool because often when you undertake sort of a planning study, everybody's going, now what happens? Well, we immediately, and what happens is we start building this right now. So this is sort of a great kind of comprehensive and very specific thing that's going to happen. And basically you're going to go from Mitchell to Pine with the improvements. And part of this little project will be deciding how we spend that money to do that. The grant, could cover new paving, event power for lighting, new trees, bulb outs, various kinds of things. So it's figuring out what we want and how we want to invest that money. Next slide. And this is, as Erica mentioned, the schedule. So the yellow is sort of working on the downtown streetscape plan, which we hope to be coming back to the council with something in summer. Like this is sort of the downtown streetscape plan. Then we, sort of concurrent in summer, then we kick off the phase 1 construction documents, which is sort of the green line. And, we do the Caltrans coordination, and we do the design drawings, and we do the bidding. And basically, you'll be looking at construction to start in the spring of 2021. So that's kind of showing you how that works out. She wants to go faster. Well,
I think the schedule is really compressed.
Well, it is. It is, and that's why we're going to, I'll hit the project goals, and we come to you tonight because we're going to be doing really intense outreach to kind of get that there. But next slide. We have, part of this process is we have a steering committee that's, local community leaders and businesses to help us sort of check in along the way, guide us and to, be ambassadors to the rest of the community. And we've been working with them to create sort of overarching project goals, because often you get halfway through and you're like, what were we trying to accomplish? And so this is sort of the first step. And we obviously want to create a vision for the downtown that can be incrementally implemented, because we won't be able to do it all at once. Through the outreach process, this whole process builds community, that the community participates in. We're recognizing what they want, and we're building something for the community and building on the community spirit. Certain things, we have to satisfy grant requirements. We want to support the economic health of downtown. There's no point in doing improvements if you basically kill the businesses during construction or with something else. I mean, that's a given. We have to protect that. Small town ambience. I mean, that's what's kind of special here, and we want to make sure we continue to keep that local flavor, which is respecting that historic and agrarian heritage. We want to promote bike and pedestrian usage in the downtown. Increase pedestrian dwell time, how, with the retail theory of, merchants and such, is the longer pedestrians linger, the more they, use your shops and such like. So have people not just pull into a stall, run into a store and go, but it's a destination. It's a place where you linger. The process will have to define the scope of the improvements for phase one, like how we're going to spend that initial money, and obviously accommodating parking needs, because that's always sort of a challenge. We'll be looking at things like park outs and bulb outs and stuff, and making sure that, once again, we don't, kill the goose while we're creating the feathers or something, the beautiful thing. Next slide. So we can't do this without extensive outreach with the community, because this has to be sort of come from what people really want to see. So we have an outreach plan that basically occurs in rounds. The first round is, what do you like about the streetscape? What could we improve on? What do we need to add? So it's just really open-ended questions with doing that. We will be having a series of different ways that people can provide input at that level. Then we'll take that input and go out for the second round. Will be, here's sort of the overall vision that we think we're coming up with. What are the priorities? What things need to be tackled first? And then as we get down to Main Street, really so we're planning to put a tree there and a bulb out here, reviewing the very specifics of that in great detail. So it sort of goes from sort of high level, each phase kind of fine tuning down. Next slide. So the community engagement, so in the rounds, we sort of are working, so all the sort of light green aqua is steering committee meetings we're holding. So during the first round, we'll have a couple steering committee meetings. We're having also meetings with Main Street stakeholders. There's people who have a vested business interest in sort of the downtown, and we want to make sure and have a place where they can meet, so they don't just feel like they have to come to a community-wide meeting, but that we can sit down and specifically work through some of their concerns and issues. And those are yellow meetings, and you can see they're occurring in each round. And then we have the blue meetings are where we're inviting the entire community to provide input. So we'll have all these different levels that are happening. Also, we'll be coming, you see the Planning Commission will be coming back to you a few times through this process, and the City Council. Sort of, it's this process where we go, we check in. We go, we check in. And so one of the things I wanted to share with you is we will be holding a community open house. If you'd like to share this with your friends, we will have a stakeholders meeting on March 20th. We're going to be holding it at the firehouse with the stakeholders and such in the evening, but we're having a community event. It's a pop-up at the building downtown at 1335 Main Street. The Ritchie building. Yes, it's the Ritchie building. Somebody said Goodman, Ritchie, the Ritchie building. One of those. The owner is allowing us to go into that space and sort of do a pop-up event so people can drop in and see what we're proposing. We can ask them questions. We'll have some dot boards and things for them to participate. It'll be from 10 to 2, so we can catch sort of the lingering breakfast crowd and the lunch crowd and anybody in between doing errands. So if you see us, please come in and invite other people to come in. I have some flyers for you to take if any of you have a place you'd like to post that or share that with someone. And yeah, we're looking forward to meeting people to find out what they want, and I think it's going to be a really fun project. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commission?
Yes.
Please.
Is it possible to, for the commissioners to go to the Main Street stakeholders meeting to hear what the shop owners have to say?
I don't see any reason why you couldn't. We're just not inviting, I mean,
The general.
anybody could show. I'm not
Yeah.
saying, please show me your business license when you walk in or anything like that. But we wanted to make a forum where it could be a little bit more, you know, that.
Along the same lines, I had a question too, because I hear what you're saying about making a forum. I'm wondering if there's a way to make it a forum and to make it specifically for instance, for a stakeholders meeting, but invite the public, any interested public, so they can hear the Main Street business owners' perspective and point of view. Because if you don't, you don't always know that, and vice versa. When it's the community meeting, the focus will be on the community, but Main Street people will be invited specifically to go. I think that might be.
I think, and certainly we're not, as I said, we're not restricting anybody, but we're making sure people are finding like an evening time that they can meet and such like that. So
I was
yeah,
thinking of making an extra effort to actually publicize that.
Okay, I think that's a good
I don't
idea.
know if anybody would be interested, but I think it would be nice
Well,
to
I
offer
think
that.
I would think that some of the stakeholders might be interested in going to the community to see some of the things they're saying.
And vice versa. Yeah,
and vice
yeah.
versa.
Okay.
The other thing I forgot to mention, we also have a project website so that anything, all this will be transparent. Anything that comes out of a community or a stakeholder meeting will be sharing that information. The website may be up as early as tomorrow, but it will be up this week. It's Cultivate Main Street. Let's see. It's, well, I'm going to give you a flyer, and it's right at the bottom of the flyer. How about that? You don't have to write it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. She's too good. Here, you want to take one and pass it down?
Thank you.
Or take multiple? Yes, no, I think that the more people that are participating and giving input, the more likely we are to come to the right solution that's perfect for this community. And that's what it's all about. It's really like discovering the things that resonate with everyone. Anybody else have questions? I hope to see you at least at either the stakeholder or at the community pop-in. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go full speed reverse. Oh, pardon me. Mr. McKelly, please. It is for you.
Anthony McKelly, 1125 Cornella. I'm a part owner in the building at 1351 Main Street called The Saint. I'm just hoping the group that's doing this, it gives a more realistic picture to the businesses on Main Street. I was at a meeting 2 or 3 months ago about this, and the city said this project will take 4 months. There is no way in the world, and I tried to assure all the business owners, it is not going to take 4 months. And the amount of money they're spending, you could triple or quadruple that amount of money. Because I know this is early maybe, but I've been told they're going to go to a hardscape versus the pavers. So that means that every service to every building has to be replaced. Because if not, a few years down the road, those are going to leak. You're going to be tearing up all the sidewalks or this hardscape stamped concrete that you're going to pour. We've twice now had those trees flood our building with sewage. And finally, our tree was taken down 3 or 4 years ago, petitioned the city, and they agreed, and we just got tired of sewage coming in. There's also a 4-inch gas line right behind those trees on the west side of the Main Street. And I don't know if people are aware that there's a 4-inch gas line there. So when you start this project, if you don't contact PG&E, you're going to start it. They're going to make you, or maybe recommend, replacing that whole line that is going to throw this whole project months or a long ways down the road. So I just hope these people look at everything that needs to be done before they just jump into it, because you will pay for it tremendously, I think, down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKelly.
Staff would just like to highlight that a similar presentation will be going to the City Council 1 week from today. So just more opportunities for outreach and get some more community involvement, basically excitement about this project and the kickoff that's coming.
Just responding to Mr. McKelly's comments, the problems there in the utility connections to Main Street businesses under the sidewalk are, I don't know if chronic is really the right word, but I remember the same subject being in front of the City Council 25 or more years ago when I was on it. So one would hope that in undertaking a project of this magnitude, there would be some thought to how to reduce the difficulties that we've had historically with those connections. But I know one of the issues, in fact, has been where the city's responsibility ends and the private property owner's responsibility begins. And it's been a complicated, frustrating process, I think, for a lot of the property owners and perhaps for city staff as well. Did you have some comments on that might enlighten us all?
So concurrently with all the public outreach for the Streetscape plan, I've been working directly with BKF engineers on hitting the ground running with Caltrans. We had our field review. We've already got our comments back on the environmental and some additional technical studies. Right now, they're not thinking anything's insurmountable. Doesn't seem like a major up. I was shocked because I've worked with Caltrans for many years on highways too, and they seem like they've fixed some of their issues, I'm hoping. But it looks like a lot smoother process. They fixed some kinks. I don't want to jinx the project, but we are going to start working with Caltrans encroachment permit portion division really quickly because we don't want any snags. So we're going to start that process concurrently with the Streetscape so it can all mesh at the same time in a perfect scenario. But we're looking at all the underground utilities. The goal is to replace all those service laterals, engage PG&E now, and engage Caltrans. Everyone's engaged, so there's no like, well, I wasn't told, you know. So I appreciate your comments, but that is all being looked at. So including throwing fiber optic because we don't have anything in downtown right now, and we need that brought to downtown. So all those concerns are being looked at and addressed.
Thank you. Now do I get to go in reverse? Okay, we're going to back up to item 5.1.
Don't stand behind the silver Porsche is what you're telling us.
Well, that's probably always a good idea. This is consideration and recommendation of an ordinance amending St. Helena Municipal Code Section 17.08.060 to authorize City Council Subcommittee review of water usage data to verify that recipients of discretionary land use permits and approvals comply with water-related representations made during project review and with water-related conditions of project approval. Not sure who presents the staff report unless perhaps it's the city attorney?
Yeah, I think the idea was that I would do it, but I'll be very brief and turn it back to you. So,
Stop right there, that'd be very good.
yeah, well, I won't be quite that brief. The staff report really pretty much lays it out as it says that for several months, the city council's been considering issues with respect to water use, and especially when there's some businesses that may be using more water than they're entitled to, or that they should be using based upon their approvals. There's issues that arise around confidentiality of water use because of certain protections from disclosing customer data. So the proposal that was created that the city attorney drafted in consultation with the city council and they considered was basically to do an amendment to the zoning ordinance that would allow for a council subcommittee to be appointed on an ad hoc basis. So it wouldn't be a permanent committee, it wouldn't be a Brown Act committee at public meetings, but that a couple council members that were appointed could meet and look at any particular customer usage data to evaluate whether there were some issues with respect to compliance with obligations, such that the city would then consider pursuing some corrective action. So the city council considered an ordinance, and the next step now was to present that to the planning commission, because since it's part of the zoning code, the appropriate procedures for the planning commission then to comment on that, and to then make a recommendation as to go back to the city council, where this all started, of course, as to what to do. So the proposed ordinance that the city council considered is in the packet, and then in the amended packet, there is some revisions to that proposal that the planning commission chair has made or is offering for the planning commission's consideration. And so then obviously the steps are for the planning commission to hold a public hearing and to consider the proposal and any potential amendments, so that it could, at the end of this agenda item, act on a position, a recommendation as to how the city council should proceed. So was that hopefully quick enough summary of the agenda item, so I can turn it back to the people that are actually going to make the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Calton. Ms. Camaro, were my comments on Exhibit A available to members of the public other than online? Are they out on the table?
They were posted online, and they are in the back table as well.
Mr. McKelly, did you find a copy of my red line there?
Being the only member of the public.
Yeah, no, it's simple when there's only one person here. Thank you.
The agenda was also amended, and it was sent via email as well.
Yeah, no, understood. But I know that Mr. McKelly would be interested, so I wanted to be sure he had it. Yes, that is what I'm talking about. So, if no one objects, I thought I would begin by explaining my comments, and then we can perhaps go to questions of staff and open up the public hearing as you wish. But in general, I was interested, well, one of the things that caught my attention as I read this draft ordinance is that it will apply to the Planning Commission when it's the final decision-making body for discretional approvals. So I began thinking about, what questions would I have as Planning Commissioner about how to implement this, and do those questions suggest any useful changes. So that was a frame of mind that that led to my comments. I'm not sure there's anything particular I would say about the comments on paragraph A. I think that's just trying to make it consistent with what follows. Well, excuse me, now I'm looking at the wrong one. At the beginning of paragraph A, I thought it would help if we clarified that it's an application for a conditional use permit or other discretionary approval, other than just permits or other discretionary approvals. I thought that clarified things some. And then I was also thinking about, well, what kinds of representations do we receive with applications? For me, the sort of generic reference to representations without a definition or any explanation generated some uncertainty. And so I looked at the guidelines in the document that's on the Public Works website for completion of the water neutrality analysis. I looked to see what kind of information we're directing applicants to provide there. And then without actually looking at our use permit applications, I assumed that there might be some information there. So, my first concern was to give, some sense of the context and the form in which applicants are routinely presenting us with information about water and what facts might be relevant there. So I say verification of information provided in the application water neutrality study, as well as any related representations made by the applicant. We're often going to hear, when we have questions or issues raised about an application, we're going to hear statements made at the microphone that are presented as clarifications or corrections. So I'm assuming that that's the kind of additional representation we might be concerned with. I'm not sure what more than that would in the end be verifiable. And the rest of my edits are really, more than anything else, intended to make the whole of the ordinance consistent with the first paragraph. So with all that, I'd like to invite commissioners to ask questions of staff, or if they pertain to my comments of me. That works either way.
I've got a couple, if I could, please.
Certainly.
By the way, thank you for taking the time and effort to do this. I think it is clearer. Have other jurisdictions done it this way?
I have not seen this before. I don't know, can't say that other jurisdictions haven't, but it's a creative approach to this issue. It's a creative approach to this issue.
Yeah, I understand the city council wants this done, but of course, when somebody says, a lawyer says it's a creative approach, that gives me pause, but nonetheless.
Lawyers can be
There's
creative.
something wrong with creativity? I thought it was the best part of lawyering.
Changing the narrative and that sort of thing. Was that your question?
That's my question. Anybody else does?
Well,
The answer is no.
can I just ask a quick, when you say the issue being that am I not on?
You're on.
Yeah. There. The issue being that we're not privy to this kind of free peek into what people's usage is.
It's not, I would say it's not that common that a city council committee would be reviewing such utility usage data, because in most, well, one, you have the confidentiality issues, and two, you have it as something that would be looked at by staff initially and issues raised. And that this doesn't preclude staff looking at those issues initially and bringing forward any sorts of problems to the decision makers, whether it's the city manager or to a city council, to pursue further action. But there's nothing that prohibits a city council subcommittee from looking at these issues in the first instance to see how water usage is, how water is being used by various water users in the city. So that might have been a little bit of a long answer to your question, but I hope that sort of.
Well, if you could just clarify, they can look now, or they cannot?
Right now, because of the confidentiality of such user data, it would not be something that would be disclosable to the city council as a whole. And so the idea would be that, because that would be releasing it to the public.
Unless.
So if there's an ad hoc committee of a city council that's not a Brown Act committee, then that is publicly, that's a public meeting, 2 individual council members with this authority of the ordinance would be allowed to look at such issues so that it could then be brought to the city council as a whole.
I was just going to say, in a town where water is an issue, however, 6254.16F says that if it's if it's decided that if public interest is to be served, if that's more important than the confidentiality, then the confidentiality takes second place, and that's in these situations. That's what this is addressing. When, to my mind, because of the water issues in this town and what's happened in the last year or two, that when it has been, a lot of the public has said, "Hey, it's in our interest sometimes to know."
It is sometimes, and that's right, and that is consistent with what this proposal is. And some water utility providers, for example, will publish data about excessive water users in sort of to disclose to the public as to such usage. But that would not have been generated by going to the board of that governing board of that utility provider in the first instance to say, okay, here's everybody's water usage data. Let's put that all out, and now the board will make a decision as to what to say to otherwise publish on its website. So this situation would be that an ad hoc committee of the council, which is responsible for governance of the city, would be able to have a look at such confidential utility user information to determine whether such an issue should be brought forward for further consideration or other such public disclosure.
Right. So I guess in that case, is this a typical way to handle it? I was just wondering, have you seen it elsewhere in a situation like this?
Such as this proposal? Is that what you're asking?
Well, in a situation where this issue would come up in the way it's come up here. Is this?
I don't know if I understand your question, but I think it's a similar question what the other commissioner stated. And
exactly.
I have not seen this as a means by which a public agency would be pursuing such information or evaluating such information in order to decide whether it should be pursuing any particular action. But that doesn't mean that that isn't an appropriate way to do it. It's entirely appropriate for 2 members of a governing body in an ad hoc manner to, as an ad hoc committee, to evaluate such issues as part of their capacity as the ultimate legislative and administrative body of the city, to see if there shouldn't be certain disclosure or enforcement actions undertaken.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you asking for questions at this point, or what?
Oh, I was going to offer a comment of my own,
Okay.
and we'll keep going.
Okay.
I think just maybe to help everyone in the commission understand the somewhat complicated interplay of the Public Records Act requirements and the ordinance that's in front of us. And then, well, yeah, I don't think we need to talk about that really to understand what we're looking at here. When one looks at the language in the statute, and please, Mr. Siegel, just interrupt me if I get something wrong here. But I think I'm on pretty solid ground because I was looking at all of this and thinking about tonight's meeting. The Act simply requires that the public agency, and doesn't say the City Council or the Board of Supervisors, it just says the public agency, with respect to those records that are generally exempt from the requirement that all public records be disclosed, okay? There is an exception to that exemption when a finding is made, that the public interest in disclosure outweighs the public interest in keeping the records confidential. To me, that was very interesting. It's not the juxtaposition of the private interest in confidentiality with the public interest in disclosure. It's the public interest in confidentiality with the public interest in disclosure. So that's a determination that can and often is made at staff level. I'm sure, in most cases, perhaps all, in consultation with the city attorney or the county council, but it's not a determination that has to be made by the city council. However, concerns about the large water users under contract, concerns about possible lack of enforcement of terms of those contracts or other conditions of approval related to water neutrality, what have you, were such that all of this was a subject of discussion before the council, and the council declined to make a broad finding up front, right? It could have said, for example, and I think myself that this would make a whole lot of sense, that the public interest in ensuring that the very large water users conserve as much as possible and are not in violation either of their contracts or there are contracts or otherwise using excess water. I don't think there'd be any difficulty in making the finding that the public interest in disclosure outweighs the public interest in confidentiality. I'm not sure I feel the same way about a decision to disclose everybody's water bills. But you know, there's more than one way one can parse that out, and the opportunity that the council had to move forward was based on creating the committee to review the records, and the determination of what should or should not ultimately be made public is in effect deferred in the process created by the ordinance. So that's essentially the structure we have. The subject that clearly, you know, attaches now to every discretionary approval that's new, or the determination that's new, is this determination of whether or not the information provided by the applicant is accurate. And there's also authority created here for the city, and this would apply to the work we do, to impose conservation-related conditions of approval. So there's a very clear authority here to enact requirements as part of a discretionary permit that affect how much water an applicant may use or how it may be used. We don't have any real practice yet in doing that, not much that I can think of, but that's a very clear and direct sort of authority that we now have. And then, you know, there is this process for the ad hoc committee's review of records that presumably leads to some kind of report or reports to the council that will then make a decision, at least as I understand this structure, about what, if anything, should be disclosed to the public and any other actions they might wish to take. So that's how I understand it. And the only question on my mind, really, in reviewing the ordinance was sort of what can we do in our recommendation to the council to make it better so that when things do come before us, we know what to do and we know how to do it, and we don't find ourselves getting stalled trying to understand what it means. And the council may agree with my comments or they may not, but hopefully in the process of discussing the comments, and that, I say my comments as if you as a commission decide to forward them, we'll all learn something about what the council intends to be done. And that's the most important thing for us, is that we have an ordinance that we understand how to implement. So that's my bit.
I have a question for you. The red in number B and C, is that the addition, is that the new ordinance? And then you have, and it's part of your comments to have lined out some of the sentences, or is this all your comment? I'm not
The
sure.
red line should be the new language that's been added by staff and particularly by the city attorney to the existing ordinance. I call it red line, that's just a generic term for highlighted comments in my world. I think I tried to put all of my new language in blue.
Okay.
I have a brand new computer with a brand new version of Word, and I could not figure out how to get it to show my deletions. So I just worked with it as best I could, hoping that...
So you cross, your deletions are just lined out then?
They're gone.
Oh, they're gone.
They should show in a table or somewhere else, but they do not show with a strikeout.
Well, then the strike...
If I may, I'm not sure
Yes.
that's right.
Is it not?
What I'm looking at the online version, and as I read it, and I'm not saying that I'm necessarily correct about this.
No, I
that
do have
what's,
some
what's
strikeouts.
shown,
Yeah.
what's shown in what I would call true red is what had been proposed for your consideration originally.
Okay.
Right.
And it's an underlining. Because it's modifications of the ordinance. And then the changes that you, Chair, have done, there's some that are in blue, and then there's some that are
They're
in
in
a
magenta?
brick red. Magenta,
Oh, okay, I see.
I don't
Yes.
purport to be an expert in hues, but I think that it's quite a bit darker than traditional red. That's what I'm seeing.
Yes.
Okay.
I've got it on the screen now.
But the lining out, there are some things that are lined out. Is that done by
I did that.
who did
That's
that?
me lining out my own wording there, or, it's hard to know. It's really hard to know. I was struggling so much with this new version of Word.
Okay, well, can I?
And the slightly different color red.
I can see the difference.
Ms. Lester.
Okay, got it. Well, I have some questions then.
Go
about
for it.
Okay. In number B, it talks about B, big letter B, little letter b. It says, to ensure future compliance. And then down in C, the first sentence, notwithstanding the foregoing, Lester, upon the determination by, back to the other City Council Subcommittee, Lester, and referral to the City Council of that determination, regular, that there has been a violation of, and then it's crossed out, the non-compliance with a representation made by and/or. Since number B has compliance, why is that? Why did you strike that out? It seems to me to be appropriate. I would rather see it left in.
Well, honestly, I don't know what it means to comply or not comply with a representation. If an applicant stands up and says, I'm not going to use very much water, I don't know what that means, and I'm not sure what it would mean to say that the applicant is not in compliance with what he or she said. On the other hand, it's very clear to me what we're talking about if we're talking about non-compliance with a condition of approval. What it means to make a misstatement of material fact or a false representation in the application materials. I think that's something everyone can get a pretty clear grip on. So yeah, I reworded this. I had a conversation with the city attorney about it, and that was Mr. Brown, not Mr. Siegel, is here tonight. This is really, for me, just a suggestion this language goes to what happens when this information goes back to the council. They may like it or not. It works better for my sensibilities about what this is intended to accomplish.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but then can I finish my?
I was going to tell you what I think it means. I think it means that we're going to have to be careful about our conditions, particularly for water use, and probably include more in our approvals on that. If somebody stands up there and says, okay, I'm not going to use any water, I'm going to condense it all from the atmosphere, here's my gizmo to do it, right? Then we'll have to make that a condition of the permit.
Okay, I understand that. I'm talking about the consistency between these two, just in language. And for what I'm saying, I would be happy to see, it says up at the top, future compliance with existing and new conditions of approval. Then rather than strike out the non-compliance part, I would say non-compliance with the existing and new conditions of approval. That would make, you see where you've crossed it out? It says, or non-compliance with the representation made by, yes, I would just say, instead of that, just say non-compliance with existing and new conditions of approval, which is what you added to number B, and that would make number C consistent. I really don't want to see the word non-compliance taken out, but I understand your issue with non-compliant with what, and so I would suggest leaving non-compliance in there, but then adding with existing and new conditions of approval, as you did in the first sentence of letter B. Am I making any sense at all to anybody?
No, I understand the comment.
Okay, and then perhaps what more significantly, I am, maybe it says so in here somewhere, but my sense is, okay, they're going to be a subcommittee of 2 council members who are going to investigate, essentially, follow through and investigate. Is that an appropriate interpretation of what this subcommittee is?
You could call it review or investigate.
Okay,
sure.
Review, that they're going to review. If they come up with some issues that they feel are, that are not acceptable and that are not in compliance with the, let me just use the language, with the existing and new conditions of approval, I think they should then be able to inform the rest of the city council if the city council is going to go forward and act on anything about it. And then that brings me to the next question. Is there any enforcement? Are there any consequences or enforcement? Is that part of this, this ordinance at all? And if not, why bother?
Well, your comments are certainly appropriate to the context, but unless I'm mistaken, what's before the commission for a decision about what to recommend to the council is just the change to the zoning ordinance. We haven't been asked to comment on the council's decision about how to create the subcommittee and what the subcommittee should do.
But doesn't the ordinance include that as part of the ordinance? I mean, that's described in the ordinance.
The ordinance talks about the city council's authority and discretion.
Doesn't talk about the ad hoc committee that it will be.
Maybe I could jump in.
Yeah,
So the council as a body determined what policy changes they desired to make and directed the city attorney to write those policy changes into the zoning ordinance. So I think the concern that is being discussed is it's not the role of the commission to broaden that policy direction that was set by the city council.
But we're supposed
Changes
to
to this
comment on
ordinance.
it?
You're supposed to comment to this particular ordinance, but it's not our role to broaden the direction provided.
But can our comment be that it's not broad enough?
If the body of the commission chooses to provide that comment to the city council, yes.
And that there are no consequences and no enforcement.
But I just would point to the end of this
Maybe there
statement
is,
where it does say, and on that basis, order, and it talks about disclosure may be granted. So
Right. Oh.
But it's also important to strike back to the intent of the water neutrality ordinance, which is because this is using that information that's provided as a study regarding a project's water neutrality. Do you understand what I'm saying?
But it's about an agreement being broken or not. That's what I thought the intent of this ordinance is.
It's important to understand that the water neutrality ordinance is it's documented through a theoretical water use analysis. So it's very, you need to be cautious, and I think the city council and the city attorney were cautious in how they described what those representations are, because it is a theoretical analysis. It's important to understand that the entire basis of this is informed guess.
But this is about whether or not, after after all those calculations have been made and there have been agreements signed, this is about what happens if those agreements are breached.
But those are two separate things.
Well,
That's the
what are
important
we
thing to
looking at
recognize.
tonight? Are we supposed to be looking at that?
But it's a breach is that's not a term I would use. It's more to identify if information that was utilized to make the decision is found to not be the case. But that information is theoretical based on our own code.
I thought it was also to see whether or not these businesses were using more than they had agreed to use.
And so that, with regards to a water agreement, that is a signed contract. So there are two different pieces of existing policy that this is trying to get at.
Okay.
It's just important to be thoughtful.
So
If I may jump in just a second, and you'll forgive me, Director House, but I think this may help. To the best of my knowledge, in general, the outcome of the water neutrality studies is an obligation of the applicant to do certain things to offset the applicant's water use. And the classic is toilet retrofits, but there's a significant menu available. I don't really know all the details. In preparing my comments on the draft changes to zoning ordinance, I looked at the guidelines on how the applicant is to prepare the water neutrality study. I didn't look at examples of the related conditions, but those obligations aren't obligations to use or not use any particular amount of water. They're obligations to do certain things to offset water use. So as I read the ordinance, the concern that's called out is, well, what if that whole set of obligations was based on false information? Well, that's what as I see it, the creation of the authority and process for verifying information provided by the applicant is about. If one looks at the guidelines provided by the city, it's hard to see in terms of water neutrality studies what's there that's verifiable in any way that one could find problematic, certainly with respect to a residential project, for example, because all of the calculations are based on standard values derived from use of the space. So it would be possible to make, in theory, I guess, a false statement about the number of bedrooms in the house, but with a plan set in front of the city, it seems unlikely to me. I really don't think the information about water use in a typical water neutrality study is likely to be problematic, but I believe there may be some real concern about the implementation of the water conservation measures on the output side of it.
And just to add to that, new development is what's going to be bringing forward water neutrality studies and having conditions placed on them. If they're found to be in violation of a condition, then that in and of itself is grounds for revocation of that approval. So that authority already exists. That's correct. Already exists under current regulations.
Okay.
This is intending, I think, to allow decision-making bodies or individuals on decision-making bodies a chance to kind of double check that some of that information is done and available in addition to the work that staff already does.
So my comments were about looking backwards, about sort of where we are right now with all the water neutrality studies and projects that have been approved in the past. But what's new here is that we are authorized by the ordinance itself to impose water conservation measures. So the ordinance contemplates, I think, at least the possibility, more often than has been true in the past, of saying you can only use this much water, or maybe it's you can only use this much outside in irrigation, or I don't know. I think those things would be tailored project by project. I'm hard pressed to think of any example where that's been done in the past in quite those terms. There may be some. I'm sure it's not typical. I've never seen it in the year and a half now that I've been on the commission, but I think there's an impetus to, especially, I think we'll see it with larger new projects, to include conditions that will be enforceable, and then that for which much of the language here will be very relevant.
And I would just like to add, we actually do. So all projects are required to comply with the state water efficient landscape ordinance, which does provide a water budget for landscaping for outside projects based on square footage. That's verified through the building permit process. Staff does require all the retrofits to be done with building permits. So there is another set of verification that's done at the staff level through the building permit process to confirm the information provided in the theoretical water use analysis.
Well, but I don't wish to be argumentative, but rather to clarify my own understanding, if I've misunderstood. My understanding of the landscaping requirements and the water budget created for those is that the water budget relates to the proposed planting, and that one is required to develop the landscaping as proposed, but I wasn't aware that in addition, we imposed a condition of approval that set a limit on how much one could irrigate.
The limit is based on the WELO, the state law. So we impose the condition that says you must conform to the state law.
We conform to the state. Oh, so
That's
it's
correct.
indirect.
That's
well,
right.
that's why
That's
I
correct.
hadn't caught it. Thank you. That does clarify.
Also, though, isn't this, okay, so how does this fit in? Because I know the public was very much interested in knowing, since we have a finite amount of water, and since water rates were going up because, you know, when this first started happening, because of the scarcity thought, the fear of scarcity, that the public thought they should be able to know how much these businesses are using. You know, especially since they were paying the same rates, and you know, and that, I mean, that was the feeling that, you know, we're all going to have to start paying more because there's this sense of scarcity for water. We need to know. We think we have the right to know who are the big users and have a say in what goes on. So
you don't have a right.
Well, I am not, by the way, I want to clarify here.
Okay.
This is not what I'm saying. This is what I heard the public saying.
Okay.
And which had some influence in precipitating this ordinance, that's all. So
the public doesn't have a right. What they do have is the ability to approach the city council, and they have, and said, gee, we'd like the city council to review this stuff. But because of the Public Record Act and the Brown Act, it's a record that they can't review as a council. If they review it as a council, it becomes exposed.
Well,
That's illegal.
They can under 625416F.
If they make the determination.
If they make the determination, but you can't make the determination until you look at it.
Exactly, which is
A member of the public could take the very same request to court and ask the court to make the determination.
If they had the money to do that. But, I mean, I'm hearing you. I
Well,
just
yeah,
thought
and
that's what this was
typically it
about.
isn't members of the public who litigate Public Record Act requests. Typically, it's newspapers. But big battles over disclosure of information that a public agency chooses not to disclose do occur, and information is often, but not always, released as a result. What we have before us is the council's implementation of the policy decision it made in response to those public concerns. And
Right.
that's what we have. We're not tasked with advising the council on how to respond to those public concerns. We're tasked with telling them whether or not we think the draft ordinance does a good job of that piece.
Well, okay.
And I read it, thought we could make some useful changes.
But a change that would say if the entity was found in non-compliance with the agreement, that the rest of the city council should be informed about who it is, not the public, but the rest of the city council, if they were going to be you don't think that's...
You can't, that's the same thing.
This is one of those things that isn't shielded under law.
May I?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
That's shield, discussions about it are shielded under law.
Except for the exception.
Mr. C.
I think,
please.
Is it under law?
I would take a look at the last clause, the last 3 lines of subdivision C, and I think this addresses the concern that you have. Now, what the council will do in each circumstance is on an ad hoc basis. We don't know, but there is authority in that last clause.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It really depends on what the subcommittee decides
Thank you.
So,
Under this, they're empowered to look at it. If they say there's nothing here.
Your microphone, Commissioner Punt.
If the city council subcommittee says there's nothing here,
Right.
that's the end of the story.
Right.
If they think there's something there, they can go to the city council.
Well, okay, that's what I read up in the top that it's in another place I read they couldn't tell the rest of the city council, but that implies that they could. The last 3 sentences the last sentence that you
Right,
pointed
it's
out,
just the
yes.
next step is the committee goes to the city council with the report, and then the city council can consider that report and determine what sort of action to take.
Okay, so that's enough. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. But I would like to see, under number C, I would like to see the compliance, that word back in there with the same phrase that you have in number
let's
B.
take that up after we have opened the public hearing
Okay.
and closed
All right.
it. It might be long or brief, that's really up to Mr. McKelly, but I like the gavel, open the public hearing. Mr. McKelly, please. It's been a long wait.
Anthony McKelly, 1125 Cornell. I don't know if any of your members were here in 1975, 1976, but water is our most critical resource here. My family took every shower with a garbage can. That water then went either to flush the toilet or into the laundry. The water in the laundry went into our laundry tray, and we watered our plants outside. That's how bad the drought was then. Fortunately, we haven't been down to those restrictions of getting just a few hundred gallons of water a day, because most people probably today could not do that. I was part of a group requesting this because we saw so many people come into the city council, hotels, wineries, wanting to expand and saying, we will use no more water if you let us expand. But there was no way to check that. It's not that we didn't trust the staff, but we voted for all the people on the city council. They were our voices, so we went to them and said, somebody needs to check this to make sure these people coming, because we're going to get more hotels, more wineries wanting more stuff, that they're telling the truth when they come to a body as this. I don't think we want anybody to lie here. And because of that, it took a while for the city attorney, because it took months, but he finally came up with this draft. And the draft was that 2 people on the council would get to look at it, but then if they found a wrongdoing, they would discuss it in closed session. We, the public, would never find out. Just the council would understand this. If I'm incorrect, Noah or Erica can correct me. But we'll never know. But we wanted somebody who we elected to look at these things because I don't know if you know that we cannot get by on the water that St. Helena has from Bell Canyon and our 2 wells. We buy 600 acre-feet from the city of Napa. The water contracts we have, and most of them are outside contracts to wineries. There's 51 of them. They use 575 acre-feet, almost all the water we buy from Napa, and it's a much higher rate than our water from Bell Canyon or our 2 wells. But yet, the citizens have to pay that higher rate in their rate bill because they're all averaged together. The wineries and its high users really get the benefit of it. And in this last water rate increase, wineries used to pay more per cubic foot of water. In that, they were even with us. So they can use all they want and get it at a reduced rate. And a lot of these water contracts, say a winery has a 12 million gallon water contract. They might be only using 2 million gallons. Our question to the City Council was, why do you have 12 million gallons? Reduce that contract to really what they're using, because if they go beyond that, that means they're expanding, which means they have to come back to us. But then that would reduce maybe our dependence on this buying this water in Napa, because we're committed by these water contracts. According to Mayor Galbraith, because I brought that up to him, that what happens when we have a drought? He said, and I don't know if he's corrected this in public or anything, but that we're obligated to those water contracts before the citizens of St. Helena. And that to me is not right. And that was the reason for looking at these water contracts to see if they're using what they do, because you can go on the city website for all the water contracts and there'll be a check if they're in compliance. But in that compliance, it's also if they go over and pay the fine, they're in compliance. So we don't know what all these big users are doing. For instance, BV Winery has moved most of their facilities to St. Helena. We have a 12 million gallon water contract with BV. But yet now, just this week, they're moving all their Tapestry brand now to St. Helena. Can I continue?
You may.
Thank you.
Well, you can continue to the next beep.
Okay. I'll be done by then. Okay. But anyway, all that water now, they're coming to St. Helena because we have no water contract with them here. They have taken that water and sold it to another entity to run BV Winery. Our concern is, does the city really want to give an entity water, then can move their facility to St. Helena and then sell that water to another entity? To me, that's double dipping. And we want the City Council to look in all these issues because water is just going to get worse here. I mean, getting water, as people grow, everybody needs more water. Napa may not sell us enough water, and we have no resource to develop our own water unless we want to drill another well, because raising Bell Canyon is a non-issue. I mean, it's gone through, it isn't going to happen. And our concern is just that we have enough water for the citizens of St. Helena, not these mega wineries and these mega businesses and hotels that are coming here. We're more concerned about the people that live here every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKelly. I'd ask if there's anyone else from the public who wants to speak. That would be kind of silly. So I'm going to close the public hearing. If something comes up, Anthony, and you want to speak again, just ask permission. Okay? Well, I've already talked a lot. So I'm going to try to be quiet and listen to the rest of the commission.
Well, and I don't know, in all that effort to clear the fog.
They got foggier?
My general sense is that we're sort of being asked to participate in sort of Act One of a several act play here, and we don't know what happens in Act 2 or 3 and what we're empowering or what we're even lending credence to. You know, I feel like it's a bit I mean, it seemed like there were two conversations going here, one on kind of water neutrality, which I tend to look at more from a residential you process, and I'm just more familiar with that part of it. But my understanding that part of the genesis of this, and to Mr. McCully's example, the genesis certainly was not residential users, but commercial users. So I'm just sort of trying to point out that the conversations we're having here, I'm not sure that we're dealing with the actual genesis of what this, and that's why I'm trying to figure out what the issue, what we're pointing to, what's the end game here, what are we trying to and I'm a little worried about unintended consequences and being kind of the useful idiot and kind of passing this thing forward. I'd rather be an informed, useful idiot.
Thank you. I'm going to hold back for a bit. Mr. Pont?
I see this as a novel way of going about it. But that's the only part that worries me, is that it is novel. But as it stands, the council is not empowered to review these numbers. It's something they can't do. They could do if somehow they said, well, under that piece of code, but they would have no basis to do that on, right? Unless staff came forward and said, this is what we think. Well, this inserts a council review between lead staff and the full council. That's pretty much all it does. And to do that, because commercial users, residential users, under state law, they're all water users, we're sorry. You got to apply it to pretty much everybody. Now, does that mean we're going to have to pay more attention when we write a condition on a use permit that has anything to do with water use? Yeah, probably. But it'll soon become a regular thing. Yes, this was originally aimed, I think, at the big commercial users, but I don't know how you'd narrow that down and say, only these 51 users that have outside water contracts, blah-de, blah-de, blah-de. But I don't know if that's everybody that the public is concerned with. Mr. McKelly mentioned hotels. I don't think any of the hotels in town have a water use agreement. So this does indeed allow them to catch everybody, see everybody, and it adds a layer of review to what we've already got. So I'm cool with it.
Is that true that the hotels, you mean the hotels have unlimited use of water?
I am not aware of any of the hotels have a water use agreement. Las Ocobas may, but I'm not aware of that. But it is more common than not for any commercial water user to not have a contract. They are a water customer. They pay the rates that were established through the rate studies through the years. And that's exactly right.
Yeah, and these water contracts have turned out to be more or less of a nightmare because they're not cancelable by either party. They're not set up to be renewed. They're ad infinitum. Oh, no, not these water contracts.
I was at a meeting where Martini water contract was renewed, but whatever.
These are not renewable.
Martini got a new water contract to replace the old one.
Yeah, but he had to agree to do that.
Maybe they went from 12 to 10 million gallons, I'm not sure.
No.
I'm not familiar with that.
Mr. McKelly, please. Enlighten us.
Well,
It's just on Los Cabos. I'm pretty sure they're one of the 51 water customers, and they do have a water contract with the city.
Hopefully it's a new one that is cancelable.
So what are we supposed to approve tonight?
We're supposed to make a recommendation to the council of 17.08.060. We received a draft for our review and comments and/or approval. I have offered comments in writing, but that's the text that is the subject of our action this evening.
What did you say?
Well,
Use your mic.
yeah, no, it would be foolish to recommend that the council do nothing with the ordinance that they've sent to us. Can't really get my head around that.
That's how Petaluma ended up with no planning commission at all. I told the council no, and the council said goodbye.
Ms. Anderson.
We could get together on Tuesday nights anyway. What? Oh, yeah.
No, I like the chair's revisions. They clarify it. They make it a bit cleaner. I mean, just starting off by adding conditional use permit rather than all permits. I'd hate to have to be subject to some of this stuff because I came in and got a building permit to put lattice on top of my fence. Under the way it was originally written, it would apply. So I think as changes add clarity, add direction, and don't catch everything. If you come in for a building permit, fine, you get a building permit, does not apply, right? So, I'm all for this. The council has said they want this. Here it is. The city attorney has cleared it as to form and function. Lester's addition, add a bit of clarity, which is an exercise I think we're going to have a lot of practice in once we start rewriting the zoning code. So this is a good tutorial on how these things hopefully work. And if it turns out, which I don't foresee, something poor coming out of this, well, we know we need better tutorials. But right now, this looks good. They've asked us to do it. It's been cleaned up. Let's get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Punt. Ms. Anderson.
I think that it comes from a good place, good intentions. I don't see anything wrong with it. I think that your edits do make it a little clearer than it was before. And hopefully nothing goes wrong.
I'm fine. I mean, I've talked a lot, but I'm fine. Except I really would like that. I would like non-compliance to be with the same
You
phrasing.
like non-compliance better than violation?
I would like to see where it says in B, compliance with the existing new conditions of approval, to have the counterpart in C be non-compliance with the existing and new conditions. That's
Parallel phrasing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, but I don't want to get rid of the non-compliance word. I think that's an important word to have in there.
I like violation better. It sounds
Well,
worse.
you're a guy. No. Well.
Uh-oh. That sounded like a gender smack.
Well, I mean, violation, I don't feel violative. I think non-compliance is just a gentler, but just as powerful a way of saying it. But if everybody else on the commission prefers violation, that's fine.
I'm definitely going to
non-compliance or
defer
violation.
on the...
It's adding more words that I don't think we really need, but on the other hand, it's kind of a Mox-Nix change.
Parallel whatever.
I don't know if my comment would be appreciated right now, but I would just point you, Commissioner, it isn't a parallel statement, but it does say, or a misstatement of material fact or false representation in the application materials. So there was an addition that is quite parallel to the non-compliance with the representation. Instead, it says, or false representation of application materials. So there is a very similar statement to the point you're making in the language as it's written.
It seems to be more specific. So is what you're saying that it's redundant, what I'm asking for is redundant, or what?
I'm not going to call the conclusion as to whether it's redundant or not. I think that's up for you to decide whether it's redundant, but I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that there is that statement in that line, so that one could consider it to be redundant, but I'm not going.
All right.
Again, I think that's for you all to decide.
But you're telling me that it's covered. So with respect to our honored chair, I'm fine. I appreciate that. And if my concerns are covered by things that I didn't understand, I'm fine the way it is. So if you would like to keep it the way it is, that's fine with me.
I would like to call the question then.
Um,
Are you tired of this conversation?
Y'all can change any part of it. Of course I like the way I wrote it, but I'm not glued to it. And
You'd be hell for any editor. No.
and I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
You do it.
No.
Oh, you don't want to.
Somebody else walked in, and I just wanted to make sure that.
Oh,
didn't
no
like-
more public
Okay.
comment. Yeah, you were good. What's a?
There hasn't been one yet.
Okay, I move the modified version that we forward it to the city council with our blessing, such as it is.
I second.
Any comments? A discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Gamero.
Vice Chair Pont,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hale,
Yes.
and Chair Hardy.
Yes. Okay, back to the agenda. I'm in forward now. Racing ahead all the way to, where was that? I lost my agenda place. Department reports, number 7.
Just a reminder for the Planning Commission and the public that staff intends to bring the general plan EIR, response to comments, and general plan 2040 to the commission in 2 weeks from today.
Is there any way to get the responses before then?
When it's published on Friday.
Okay, so we could come in and get a hardcover on Friday. We don't have to wait 2 weeks.
The meeting will be presented in 2 weeks from today, so staff is making every effort to publish according to the 10 days ahead of time schedule.
Gotcha. Okay, but, all right, well, you know what I mean.
Copies of the comments were provided. Did you not get a hard copy?
And there were no comments. It was, responses to the comments.
Oh, no, the responses to comments will not be provided. They will be provided along with the entire agenda packet. Yes, because it's a component of the entire final EIR, so we cannot break that apart.
Okay.
Yeah, so it will be provided. Obviously, if the commission feels it needs more time to review the document than the 10 days, then we will review it. We will hold the public hearing, and the commission can provide comments and or continue the item for further analysis to provide more time. But it is not permissible to break the document apart in how it's provided. So staff intends to make every effort to publish on Friday, just for the commission and public to understand that. However, we were impacted last week. City Hall was closed 3 days. We may not make that timeline. I do absolutely intend to get it to you at a minimum 1 week ahead of the meeting, so next Tuesday. But it is our goal to publish on Friday, and we are making all efforts. And anyone who's called me or emailed me and not gotten a response, this is the reason why. I'm focused on getting the report done.
Thank you. Item 8 is the agenda forecast, which is provided by a link. The agenda reminds me that this is also an opportunity for the commission as a whole to request items to be placed on future agendas for discussion. But if no one has any to suggest, I would move on.
I do have a small suggestion that we
Yes.
should probably think about. There must be 10, 15 bills in the state legislature having to do with housing construction, how it's to be done, how it's to be zoned, how it's to be
I think
taken.
it's something like 50. That's an
I bet.
enormous number of
Yeah.
bills.
So I think we probably need a rundown of what's out there and how they could potentially affect us, because there's some strange ones that I've read.
So that's an excellent point, and thank you for bringing it up, Vice Chair Pont. So staff has, as a majority of the commissioners are used to, and the new commissioners will may be aware of. So staff has traditionally scheduled a joint session with the commission and the council to present a land use 101 and a CEQA 101 kind of discussion item. I'm in discussions with the city manager's office to try to potentially modify that presentation this year, given the familiarity with most of the regulations that I think a majority of the commission has, and try to maybe hone in on some of the housing regulations that have changed and that are going to affect our regulatory processes, and then also maybe more of a Q&A on CEQA and land use. So that way it's less of a PowerPoint one-way conversation, and to break that up and do, here's some of the interesting housing regulations that are either have been passed or are pending, and then also to allow kind of a Q&A for applicable questions. So we're working on that, but that's an excellent point and segue, and we are cognizant of that coming forward.
I have a question, because at our last meeting, you had suggested that, and I don't remember what the topic was, but you had suggested that we agendize one of the topics that we were discussing, but it wasn't done at this point in the meeting.
That's correct.
Did you?
The request was to agendize a discussion of priorities from the list of topics. Staff would rather have that discussion at our governance meeting that we plan to hold. And also we wanted the council to have a chance to set their priorities formally before we tried to kind of at the last minute brought potentially changes to those priorities. So obviously we work at the direction of the city council. And so it was critical, staff felt, to have the priorities set from the council goal setting before commission undertook to discuss our priorities, as they should reflect those.
Adjourned. Gotta be quick sometimes.
And if any of you have kind of specific topics or questions like that for